Alright, Jason Ruona here at the Spring Indoor Nationals. We're here at Adrenaline RC Raceway, Winchester, Virginia. We're here today talking to Jason Csontos, who is really known in the vintage community. Jason, talk to us a little bit about the RC10 and kind of getting into that vintage community and talking with RC10 Talk and kind of where you kind of came from with this vintage resurgence.
Well, I guess back in 04, I joined a group called Clod Talk. It's mainly TXTs, the TXT1, Cloudbuster, stuff like that. Some kind of like the beginnings of rock crawling and stuff like that. And there was a lot of guys on there that were into the RC10s, low C's, junior T's, or like JRX2s, JRXTs and stuff. And they'd post their cars, and so we just kind of had this little subsection there. And then one day, the owner at the time, we were kind of asking him, hey, can we get a RC10 Talk, or instead we kind of play up the Clod Talk. And one day he just started it, and then made a couple guys administrators on it, and that was back in 06. So that's been going on since 06. And then through there, a couple years later, Eric Reichert started the Vintage Off-Road Nats. So that's been going on since then. Started in Connecticut, 2 different tracks in Connecticut, and then we're in Massachusetts now.
You know, what really kind of, I guess, surprises me over the years is that this car, the RC10, means a lot to so many different people, I think. And what I've seen, obviously we went through the generation of magazines, we went through the where this car was featured so often, but then we went into sort of the internet age, the website age, the forum boards. The forum side of RC was really big in the early 2000s, as he talked about having a website, RC10 Talk. But now we're kind of on the social media age where a lot of these things have transitioned to social media. I know there's an RC10 Talk Facebook page. You do some live videos from time to time. You talk about different things. Obviously the nice thing about the website side of it, or the forum side of it, was there was a nice way to organize some of these builds and categories. And there is, if you go on there, there is so much information and so many individuals that are really just motivated by just vintage RC cars, because the 80s and 90s obviously meant so much to 10 scale off-road racing. And it wasn't just the RC10, there's the low-C cars, the JRX2s and JRXTs, but, kind of going back to the forum side of things and the relationships you kind of built on there over time, it's a lot of individuals from around the world that are building and recreating these RC10s, and you've done a bunch of them. We talked the other day, you have, maybe 50 of these cars. And you know what, and that's just the way it is, because they are addictive and they have a personality. Each car kind of has a little bit of a personality on its own because they're so customizable.
And I started racing in '91. I started with a junior T running dirt oval, and then the following year I got a graphite team car, RC10 team car, and I still have it. So basically set up the way I was running it in the early '90s. So yeah, it's just, I'm into old real cars. I restore old cars, so it's like it just kind of follows over with my childhood, really.
What we used to say when we raced in these days was you could really tell what kind of a builder or a mechanic a driver was by the way that their car looked, because you could tell back then. You couldn't just really necessarily build it out of the box because you wanted to customize it. We talked before about how you've anodized the chassis on this one, and lots of times you don't even have these things brand new. This one might have been brand new, but you'll kind of bring back an old chassis by cutting off bad areas or radiusing it, and then you'll re-anodize it, and you'll make it look new again. But that's kind of part of the fun, right?
Yeah, the one nice thing about the RC10 is you can build it. There's so much aftermarket for it, and you can do so much with it. Different ways. That's why you can have so many of them, and they might look somewhat similar, you can kind of personalize each one. I think more than you can with like a low, a JRX-T or 2 or Pro or something like that. Just especially with just colors.
Yeah.
I mean, even Associated offered 5 different powder coat colors and back in the day. So yeah, you can really personalize them.
So, what we got here right now in front of us is we got obviously Jason's RC10, which he's racing here this weekend. What you did is you this isn't what I would call, I guess, a sort of 100% modernized RC10, because the only thing modern you're really running here is the electrical, for the most part. And then I have my B6, which is the most current .4 generation. But, they're dramatically different looking cars in a sense, but sometimes they got 4 wheels, 4 shocks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at the same time, talk to us about kind of going to modern electrical, 17.5 motor, and the car handles it well.
Yeah, it's actually it's not bad. I mean, I didn't really race I didn't really race any off-road back in the 90s or anything. So, and even with mod, to really have a comparison to what it was like back then running mod compared to 17.5, but I think 17.5 is perfect for these. I know there's guys who run 13.5 or 10.5s in them and stuff, but I think 17.5 suits them just fine. And you're not tearing your diffs up. You're not, and especially now that it's so hard to get parts, you want to try and maintain them as best you can.
So we'll go back. I mean, the original RC10 came out in 84? 85,
yeah,
84, 85 range is when the RC10 came out. But back in this 2013 or 14, they did a re-release on what they call the Classic.
Yeah.
And they really remade the whole car because the molds and a lot of the items didn't exist. So they sold the Classic RC10 as a kit, and it was just meant for really collectors and people who had a passion for that car to kind of get it again, kind of re-experience it. But that was a pretty big success in the vintage community. A lot of people bought those, right?
Yeah, and I never really heard an exact number of how many they made, but they went pretty quick. And then started seeing, I don't remember exactly what it was, but somebody saw the part number for the World's re-release in something, some kind of pamphlet or whatever, before anything was known about it. And then it's like, oh, the World's car is coming. So, and then a couple months later, it showed up.
Yeah, I mean, it was really kind of a surprise on the Classic, and then a surprise again on the World's car. But to me, the Classic was the one I thought that really turned out well. They sold a lot of those cars, and they're still for sale today on eBay. And other private sellers that want to sell them, but they're going for a lot more money today. And it seems like every time I look, $900 or $1,000.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes they're close to what an original one will bring. You know, it's I think that's just because of the quantity of them that are out there. There's obviously it was a limited edition.
So that kind of brought us some parts back. Into circulation, because parts were starting to get harder to come by. People were wanting more for them on eBay. And of course, what I've never ceases to amaze me, I guess, is how many parts that there were out there on eBay over the years, packaged parts, new in the box, stuff that people have never touched and opened. But it started to dwindle a little bit, and the re-releases kind of brought back parts into circulation, albeit they're a little bit different because they really had to retool both cars.
Yeah. And some of them were like the A-arms weren't marked before, like the rears, they're marked now. There's some stuff that they changed just enough that what's what.
Yeah, but it was nice. I mean, what you got here, kind of explain to us kind of what you got here. This is mostly a re-release World's car, right?
Yeah, this one's pretty much built all just from parts. Once I saw that the Associate wasn't going to be making anymore, I just started, whatever I found, I just bought it. So basically everything on this is the re-release parts, except for the shock. The shock bodies are original. Even the clamps and everything are re-release. And then all the parts that you make, or anything that you make, is basically on this car. So steering belt crank, motor plate, wing tubes, turnbuckles, nose tubes, towers, the body, the wing, wheels, tires,
Yeah.
it's pretty much completely outfitted with everything that J Concepts offered.
And that was been, kind of a fun part for us when they do the re-release. It was kind of an opportunity for us to kind of make some things that was always nice that you always kind of wanted. We went and made a couple different bodies, a couple different, anodized aluminum parts. Did the rear motor plate, which was kind of a fun thing, the front nose brace tubes. But, we've had people ask us, hey, why don't you make a chassis too? It's like everybody just in that community, first of all, in that community, they all feel like there's millions of these things and everybody, it's like, but, it still is kind of a niche thing, but it's still surprising what this car means to a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It seems a lot, I think it seems a lot bigger when that's really what you're focusing on.
Yeah.
And you see so many, you interact with so many people all over the world. It seems a lot bigger than it probably really is. But there's a lot of guys that, especially with 3D printing becoming so popular and stuff, and so many people can do it, you're seeing a lot more stuff being offered up, like the 91 Stealth copies, the 89 Stealth copies, the World's cars. And guys are making one-piece carbon tub chassis.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's, some stuff is still hard to find, but it's like as time goes on, more and more stuff is coming available that you can keep your car going. Even if you don't want to build complete cars and stuff, there's parts out there to keep what you do have going.
So, one of the things I want to talk about is how many, you've built a lot of special edition cars, I guess you would say. Every once in a while you'll let a few go. I was fortunate enough to buy a couple, from you that you were willing to let go. But talk to us just a couple of your favorites over the years. What was a fun thing for you? It seems like if you saw it in a magazine and it looks a tad bit obscure, it seems like that's kind of like your bread and butter. It's not that same one that everyone's like, oh, I want a Jay Halsey, I want a Brian Kinnell. It's like, hey, I got one of those. But you have the Rory Cole car, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of I really just got into doing replicas of old race cars, and it didn't have to be the winning car. Like, it didn't matter. Like, if it looked cool, and it was, a lot of guys, they won't tackle something if they can't find every perfect picture and know how every sticker was and I just kind of wing it. You do as much research on you as you can, try and find pictures of that driver's cars before and after the race, if possible, and just kind of do what you can. I did a replica of Jay Halsey's 85 IFMAR winner right around the time when the forum started. And it's still really not accurate or really completed, but it's just one of those things that's there to tinker with and get closer as I feel. I've done a Rory Cole from it's like 91 Euros or something like that. And Craig Drescher won that. He finished third. So that was pretty cool. A bunch of Masami replicas. I got doing a replica of his 93 World's car for the Vintage Nats this year, and the 94 Winter Champs for next year. A couple Pavitas cars, you have one of those. It's a bunch.
Yeah. I mean, they all turn out really nice, and what's interesting on those, when you do those cars, you do go with the period correct electronics, and you try to find everything, the right servo, and some of these things get more difficult as you get into the Masami cars, the special edition KO type servos, and all these different things he had. You kind of have to have separate searches going at the same time, right? Yeah,
there's cars that I started 14 years ago that still aren't done. Well, a Masami car that he ran in the 88 JMRCA race. I started that in like 2007.
Yeah.
It's actually probably longer, 14 years. But yeah, it's still not done.
You're waiting, but you got to wait up for all the parts.
Yeah, and then I actually emailed Masami like once on Facebook, or messaged him on Facebook once, and he sent me pictures of, because he still had the original car, and he sent me pictures, and I was like, oh man, I did that wrong, because all I had was these two tiny pictures. So it kind of discouraged me, so now it just sits until there's another one I'll get to eventually.
And Masami's good about that online.
Yeah.
He talks to several people. He's got a ton of cars because he won so many races and has all these different vehicles. I was lucky enough. He sent me one of his victorious cars, I guess, from the JMRCA Nationals. But he's been really nice with people over the years, kind of communicating these different details. And he's lucky enough to have a lot of the cars. A lot of the other drivers don't have any of their cars.
Yeah.
And that's been kind of nice. And his dad has preserved some of these things, and his dad probably built them all. So Masaki, we could shout out to him for keeping these things, and Masami keeping them around for all the drivers who wanted to always look at the details of these vehicles, because his cars were really kind of unique. Like, they weren't always the prettiest looking cars, but it kind of makes it neat for someone like you who wants to build a replica, because there's a lot of detail.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, it doesn't just look like a stock car.
Yeah.
So that's nice. And one thing with Masami, because he has so many of the cars left, where, like you said, a lot of drivers don't have them, and I'll try reaching out to somebody, say, hey, do you remember, so 30 years ago when you ran this race, what sticker was on the side of the, they don't know. It was just a race car to them.
Yeah.
And they ran that race, they cleaned it up, and they ran it the next week. It was, and so a lot of that stuff was talking to you about, wanting to do that Scott Hughes car from the '93 Winter Champs.
Yeah.
I got a nice shot of the chassis, but I couldn't find a picture of the body to save my life. And Scott couldn't really remember how it was painted. And then, 4 or 5 years later, I find a picture of it. It's like, okay, well, that builds back on.
Yeah.
So.
And it's a beautiful picture too, right?
It's perfect.
Yeah, it's a great shot of his car from that race, and his car was unique there too, because he had some yellow dyed parts, suspension parts and stuff. So that's what's kind of a nice thing for you, because now you can get into the detail.
Yeah. And that was really the biggest draw for that one. It was like, oh, look, there's yellow parts on it. That make a cool replica. And every one I make, I pretty much race. So I got 10, basically 10 re-release Worlds cars. And for the most part, each of them is a replica of somebody's car. So that'll be one, right, 3 or 4 years down the road, that'll get raced at the Vintage Nats.
So we kind of have both of these vehicles kind of laying out here, just because it's kind of a fun progression of the different associated cars over the years, from the RC10 to the B6. But when you're out here racing this car in our Indy class, and I've been out there turn marshaling, watching you quite a bit, and it's still a great performing car. You've changed some things to get it to perform a little better, but we talked earlier how when they're on the track, it looks so much smaller than the latest car. But when you put them here, they don't. But a lot of things with the body and the way they're shaped make the car. This car just looks so much bigger, longer, wider. But when they're sitting here, it's not as big of a difference as it looks. For some reason on the track, they look a lot different.
Yeah, and the size of the shocks and everything. But yeah, sitting next to one another, they're fairly similar.
Yeah. And when you look at how all these cars are built, I mean that the RC10, we did a video about this before, but it started a lot of these things. The bell cranks, with your steering servo, and the way that these cars lay out. This is kind of the blueprint for laying out an RC car for off-road racing in this sense. And we turn the transmission around. We've done some things, but this was the blueprint for building these type of cars.
Yeah, I kind of missed that. Some what you were saying with the noise in the background, but
like you said, we got different diameter shocks now.
Yeah.
We got different body combinations, but overall this was the blueprint that created this car. And they're all based on this. Everything, the components kind of lay out in a similar manner.
Yeah.
And like I said, we turn the transmission around. But other than that, that's the general layout that these cars are all based off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I haven't really progressed much past anything. Like the B3 is probably the newest associated buggy I have. So I have no experience with any of the new stuff, and even up close, it's because I don't really get to the track too often. But a lot of it's basically the same thing, just reconfigured and geometry changed a little bit here and there, but overall same deal.
So to kind of wind it up here, what do you think is kind of the future of, your builds coming up, vintage nationals, different things that you kind of look forward to? What do you kind of see happening, and what's on the schedule for you on the different builds?
Basically, just for me personally, just finishing up, just working on getting ready for the vintage nats in September. So that's Sami build I'm doing. My truck's pretty much ready to go. As far as the future of vintage, I mean, I think it's pretty good. Like I said, it seems a lot bigger community than it really is, but it's good to see a lot of companies making parts, because a lot of it's so hard to find now, and when you do, it's super expensive. So the more people are out there making parts and making stuff available, that's really going to help. Because I think I even talked to you about, once those re-release parts dried up, I was really worried that, because you can almost tell that once it becomes hard to get parts, people lose interest.
Yeah.
So, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. It kind of, the prices of parts kind of price people out of getting into it,
yeah,
or continuing with it.
Yeah.
I've been lucky that I got into it really early on, had a bunch of stuff, and for the most part I still have a decent amount of it.
So at the Vintage Nationals, you talked about going there in September, but there's a lot of classes there, and he's got a lot of different kind of breakdowns and so just kind of generally speaking, what are the kind of different classes someone could kind of gear up for at a race like that? Because there's ones where that include Tamiya cars. And
yeah, I know there's a couple changes this year, so I'm not gonna speak not 100% on some of it, but two-wheel drive 17.5, open tire, stadium truck 17.5. They have classic four-wheel drive, which is your Optimas, YZ10s, stuff like that. They run 13.5. Then they have, it's a regular four-wheel drive class, and that's 10.5. So that's more modern stuff like a double X, the BJ4, TC3Os. I think they even let triple X's run. I'm not totally, I don't run four-wheel drive, so I'm not totally sure on that. Then they do, the classic class it was supposed to be more like a Tamiya class, so plastic tub cars, two-wheel drive, four-wheel drive. Like I have a Man Ray, a hopped up Man Ray that I race in at. Then you get heavy metal. They have two classes of heavy metal, which some are like Cloudbusters you can run, and the other ones are like King Cabs, like the Tamiya, the Hilux, Stadium Blitzer, stuff like that. And then the wheelie class, the Minute Pumpkins or the comical ones, you do that. I think that about covers it.
All right. Well, if you want to see Jason, RC10 Talk, of course, is on there. A ton of builds on there from other people. Vintage Nationals in September. There's a page on Facebook for that.
Yep.
And we really appreciate you coming out and racing your RC10. You also have a stadium truck out here, which is a T2 based truck, but it's you went mid-motor with it.
Yeah, converted to mid-motor.
Little special, but we'll run through on some B-roll here of some video showing off the differences between these two cars, and we'll get to your stadium truck too. But thanks for coming out again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great to come out and watch these cars and kind of keep promoting them, because this is where it came from, and we like for it to stay around. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you at the next race.